This film begins in St. Petersburg, Russia, where we meet a police officer named Igor Grom. At that time, he's chasing 3 bank robbers who are trying to escape in a big armored car. When the robbers' car crashes into a broken-down bus, Igor gets the chance to get inside their vehicle and try to stop them. Unfortunately, they manage to throw him out and they get away. Determined to catch them, Igor comes up with a plan. He ends up driving a truck and crashes it into the robbers' armored car, helping the police arrest them. Now let's talk about Dmitry Dubin, who is a trainee cop. He's learning the ropes from his experienced colleagues at the St. Petersburg police station. Meanwhile, the chief of police, Colonel General Fyodor Prokopenko, is really upset when he finds out how much damage Igor's actions caused while arresting the robbers. It turns out the damage costs more than the money the robbers stole. Fyodor gets so mad that he calls Igor into his office. Meanwhile, Igor's co-workers start betting on whether Igor will get fired or not. In Fyodor's office, he scolds Igor for not following orders and doing things his own way during missions. Despite the scolding, Igor remains calm because he knows that Fyodor won't fire one of the best police officers in St. Petersburg. After all, Igor has a track record of solving many crime problems in the city. Meanwhile, on TV, there's news about Olga Aseva, the owner of a bank. She's suspected of taking money from her customers and investors. There's also a story about Kirill Grechkin, the son of famous official. He's accused of being in a hit-and-run accident that resulted in the death of a little girl from an orphanage. What's strange is that the judge actually let Kirill go free. Kirill even smiled in front of the reporters, which upset Lasha Makarov, the older brother of the victim. On the other hand, Igor, who was also at the trial, got frustrated because it seemed like in their country, money and power could influence the law. Unfortunately, as a police officer, there wasn't much he could do to change the judge's decision. That night, Igor decided to go back to his simple home, even though he worked as a cop. He lived alone and didn't care much about trends, using an old cell phone that he rarely used that year. Now let's talk about Sergei Razumovsky, who is a millionaire in the ad industry. He's a programmer and entrepreneur who just launched a new social network called Vimest. It's said to have a strong security system. During the launch, Sergei looked nervous, but his friend Oleg Volkov tried to encourage and motivate him so that Sergei could be calmer. During Sergei's presentation of Vimest, he was really surprised when he saw the news that Kirill had been cleared of all charges for the accident involving the little girl from the orphanage. This news made Sergei frustrated. After the event ended, Oleg, who had grown up in the same orphanage as the little girl who was the victim of the hit and run, asked Sergei to calm down and focus on his new project because he believed Sergei could help Kirill with his problems. Now, let's go back to Igor, who was having dinner with Fyodor at Fyodor's house. Surprisingly, the police chief seemed to have a close relationship with Igor because Igor's dad had been a work partner with Fyodor in the police force. Then, Igor got a call from the orphanage saying that the older brother of the little girl, who was the victim of Kirill's accident, had run away. Igor was worried that Lasha might want to take revenge on Kirill. So, Igor quickly said goodbye to Fyodor and went to look for Lasha at Kirill's place. When Igor arrived at Kirill's house, something shocking happened. Kirill was thrown out of a window by a masked figure who called himself the Plague Doctor. Kirill was terrified and tried to escape in his sports car, but the Plague Doctor had a flame-throwing weapon and easily stopped Kirill by setting the car on fire, resulting in Kirill's death. As Igor arrived at the scene, he tried to attack the Plague Doctor with a stone, but the masked figure stopped Igor's attack and used his flamethrower. There, Igor quickly hid behind a wall to protect himself, and he missed the chance to catch the Plague Doctor. Later, Igor returned to the police station after hearing that Lasha had been found. The police officer questioned Lasha about where he was when Kirill was attacked. Based on Lasha's statements, which seemed like he didn't know anything about the attack, Igor concluded that Lasha probably didn't carry out the attack on Kirill, especially since the victim's older brother said he was actually happy that someone had taken action to avenge his younger sister's death. After the attack on Kirill, Dmitry, who was good at drawing, joined Igor's team and helped create a sketch of the masked attacker that Igor had seen at Kyril's house. With this sketch, Igor and the team started investigating to find out who the plague doctor really was. Before heading home, Igor took all the case documents with him to study further at his place. On his way home, he saw a journalist named Yulia Tolkina being harassed by two thugs in a quiet alley. Upon seeing that, Igor stepped in and saved her. He then invited the journalist to his house. When they arrived at Igor's place, Yulia secretly took photos of the sketches and information about Igor's investigation into the plague doctor from the documents he had brought. She did this because she planned to include the plague doctor's story in her investigation report. Meanwhile, Sergei was at home, and he was really surprised to hear about Kyril's death, which happened because of an attack by a masked person. At that moment, the plague doctor, who turned out to be Oleg, arrived, and Sergei realized that his friend Oleg was the one behind these attacks. Turns out, Oleg had secretly bought special costumes and flamethrowers without Sergei knowing. There, Sergei told Oleg that he didn't agree with Oleg's decision to seek revenge by killing Kirill. However, Oleg tried to reassure Sergei and said that he would take care of all the injustices happening in their country. In another incident, Oleg, dressed as the plague doctor, tied up Olga, who had stolen money from her bank customers. He also blew up the bank as an act of revenge for her crimes. At that time, Oleg purposely scattered the stolen money so that people in need could take it, all while introducing himself as the plague doctor. He did all of this live on Vmest social media, and many people watched it. Because of these actions, the Central Police Department sent an officer named Yevgeny to handle the case of the plague doctor. Igor was annoyed with Yevgeny being sent, and it made his investigation more challenging. Nonetheless, Igor, along with Dmitry, decided to conduct their own investigation. They went to a rough part of town to meet Igor's best friend, Kyivstoner, who had a lot of information about the criminal world. Meanwhile, when Igor arrived at a boxing training area, he met up with Kyivstoner to ask about some criminals who might be connected to the costumes and weapons used by the plague doctor. Unfortunately, they didn't find any clues. Then, Igor remembered that the plague doctor had been using social media for his actions. So, he hurried to the Vmest company office to meet with Sergei. When Igor met Sergei, he asked if the Vmest company owner could trace the account or device location used by the plague doctor for his actions. Sergei explained that Vmesta has a super tight security system, making it impossible for anyone, even himself, to track its users. Later on, Oleg, still disguised as the plague doctor, did something even more extreme. He managed to capture a businessman who was responsible for creating a lot of waste, along with the businessman's family, and threatened to harm them. In a live broadcast, Oleg tied them up and set them on fire. Meanwhile, Igor and Dmitry were still trying to figure out who the plague doctor really was. They hit a dead end because they couldn't find any clues about this mysterious person. So, they decided to have a meeting at Igor's house. At that time, Dmitry had been investigating all the victims of the plague doctor, who happened to be high-ranking officials and big business owners disliked by the public. He thought that the masked figure was purposely targeting wealthy people and suspected that the next target would be Albert Bektiv, the owner of the Golden Dragon Casino, which was built on disputed land. To confirm their suspicions, Igor planned to attend a party at the casino. He felt that he needed to change his appearance, so he met up with Kyivstoner to find a fancy suit and a luxury car that Kyivstoner's crew had borrowed so that Igor could pose as a rich person and get into the event. In the evening, with his new look, Igor confidently entered the casino, which was hosting a party for wealthy business people. Yulia also disguised herself as a guest to gather information for her journalism. Meanwhile, Sergei met with Albert and hinted that the casino owner had built the building on top of a public burial ground. Albert was irritated and tried to dismiss everything Sergei said. He even asked the owner of the Vmest social network company to step aside. Back at the police station, Yevgeny, who had started to suspect Igor's involvement in the plague doctor case, approached Dmitry and pressured him to spill the beans about everything Igor had been up to. Now, back to the party, a group of regular people, inspired by the plague doctor's actions entered the casino wearing masks. They wanted to attack the rich folks attending the party. Sergey tried to negotiate with them by offering money to get them to leave, but his attempt failed because the group refused and started attacking everyone without discrimination. On the other hand, Igor, who was also a target of the Plague Doctor's group, had to use his martial arts skills to defend himself. Just as he was being attacked by several masked individuals, Yevgeny and the police arrived to arrest all the intruders who had stormed the casino. This happened after Dmitri had revealed Igor's investigative plans under pressure. After the chaos, Igor met with Yulia and took her cell phone away because she had been secretly recording everything that occurred in the casino. The following day, Igor was summoned to Fedor's office, and Yevgeny was there too. At that time, they were waiting for the police chief, who was known to have gone against central police orders by getting involved in the Plague Doctor case. Yevgeny, who never really liked Igor, took this chance to push Fedor to fire Igor. Sadly, Fedor, who couldn't defend Igor's mistakes, reluctantly decided to let him go from the police force. After losing his job, Igor started reflecting on his mistakes. He even replaced Yulia's broken phone, which he had damaged during the casino incident. On another occasion, he was sitting alone, pondering his life, when a teenager from an orphanage rode by on a bicycle, wearing a Plague Doctor mask. This made Igor realize that he hadn't investigated the orphanage in his city, so he decided to visit. When he spoke with the orphanage director, Igor learned that the orphanage was funded entirely by Sergey, who had once lived there. The caretaker also showed Igor some drawings made by a young Sergey, which surprised Igor because they depicted crows and a costume similar to the Plague Doctor's outfit. Armed with the information he had gathered, Igor hurried to meet Sergey to confirm his suspicions. As they were talking, Oleg suddenly appeared in the room wearing a Plague Doctor costume. Strangely, only Sergey could see Oleg. Igor was surprised by Sergey's behavior, as if he was talking to someone else. When Igor let his guard down, Sergey, the creator of Mest social network, hit him on the head and Igor fainted. It turned out that Sergey suffered from a condition called multiple personality disorder, which made him seem like he had a friend named Oleg. This mental disorder developed because Sergey had been bullied by his peers since he was a child, causing him to become introverted and friendless. To cope with the loneliness, Sergey created imaginary friends. Now back to the present, Igor woke up after fainting, only to find himself dressed in a Plague Doctor costume inside a building surrounded by Yevgeny and his team. At that time, Igor realized that Sergey had set him up, so he attempted to escape. Unfortunately, Dmitri managed to paralyze Igor as he was trying to slip through a narrow alley. Due to Dmitri's actions, Igor was captured by the police and accused of being the Plague Doctor. Shortly after his arrest, Igor met his lawyer for the case, and he was surprised to see Yulia, who was disguised as a lawyer to help him escape. Dmitri, feeling guilty, also tried to assist Igor so that he could leave the police station and meet with Sergey. When Igor arrived at Sergey's place, he tried to immobilize the creator of Mest. However, Sergey distracted Igor by setting off a bomb in the police station yard, which he had planted earlier. There, Igor stood there in silence, watching the explosion from a distance and thinking about the people who were hurt or killed by it. Meanwhile, Sergey got the opportunity to attack Igor with his flamethrower, overpowering the former police officer. Fortunately, Dmitri, who had come with Yulia, sprayed water on Sergey, and the three of them sought refuge in a room. They had to endure Sergey's fire attacks until Igor managed to paralyze the Vmest owner. Shortly after that, Sergey regained consciousness and was surprised to find himself tied to a chair. When he saw Igor, Sergey casually claimed that his true identity as the Plague Doctor would never be uncovered because the police had evidence suggesting Igor was the Plague Doctor. Igor couldn't accept this and thought about pushing Sergey out of the window, but managed to control his anger, especially since Yulia had recorded all of Sergey's confessions. With the recorded evidence, the St. Petersburg police were finally able to arrest Sergey. Meanwhile, Yevgeny, who arrived late at the scene, actually wanted to re-arrest Igor. Fedor, who saw this, confronted the Central Police members who were trying to disrupt the situation and even threw a punch at them. At the end of the scene, Sergei is placed in a mental hospital where he creates another version of himself with raven wings, and he hugs this imaginary figure. Meanwhile, in Syria, a soldier named Oleg is shown taking a break after fulfilling his duties. He used to be a childhood friend of Sergei, but they got separated when Sergei went abroad to study. At the same time, Oleg was assigned to serve in Syria. The film ends. The moral lesson from this film is don't trust a guy with imaginary friends and a flamethrower. Stick to real friends and marshmallows instead, cause it safer.